for this podcast, but we, if you can believe it, spent the last 10, 15 minutes talking about Pennsylvania Masonry and Masonic etiquette for dress code. But we are always honored to have him back on the Craftsmen Online podcast, our friend from A Mason's Work, Brother Brian Mattocks. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
He's properly clothed and vouched for.
at least for today.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. And this is one of those episodes where, as I like to say, Brian is a guest that has brought some visual aids, which are always a fan of. We're going to be talking about, you call this the A Mason's Work Masonic Reflection Deck. Is that the term for this?
Sure. I actually, of all the things that I have not properly named yet, uh, it's the Masonic symbols deck. I mean, sure,
Love
that'll
it.
work.
Okay. And if you've been listening to his podcast, which I know you have, you're enjoying the, every other day or every couple of days, the 7-minute, dose of how do I take Freemasonry and take those principles and those values and everything that we talk about in our ritual and our meetings and our lodge, and how do I incorporate this into my everyday life? And then Brian had a 3D printer and a really cool idea and brought the two together with a lot of the symbolism that we have. And the deck that we'll be featuring tonight when we go hands overhead display, which he has the cool capability to do that on his end. As we work through this, yes, you are able to get this. The website is amasonswork.com. We're also going to make sure that that simple amasonswork.com link is in the notes for this episode, so you can just click and start ordering this and get it for yourself, for brothers of your lodge, or just an excellent gift. I do want to say I received mine a while ago. I opened it up because I was very curious, but I have not gone through any of the exercises. Before we get into talking about this, I do want to say thank you very much. It was touching. You don't get handwritten personal notes very often, especially ones that are embossed with the square and compass, class act. And of course, my camera wants to be in reverse mode, but he did make a nice one with the Craftsmen Online brand and a very sweet personal inscription on the inside as well with his signature. And I was like, dude, this is going to be with me for a lifetime. So thank you very much for this gift.
Oh, my pleasure. I love helping guys take the objects of the craft and turn them into artifacts that they can pass down or use in their everyday life. The idea with these and why they're maybe at the price point they're at and at the build quality that they're at is because you only need one.
Yeah, and they're absolutely personalized. Like when you're like, hey, what color do you want, gold or silver? And I'm like, I guess silver, and that's the color of the tools that I have. Do you want to go overhead display and start walking through this, or
Maybe some context first will help
Sure,
just a
sure.
little, because for those of you that may not be familiar with the direct application of the Masonic symbols, it's not something that most of our ritual in any jurisdiction, it doesn't matter what it is, UK, most of the US, Pennsylvania, we get 1 to 2 sentences on any of the working tools tops. And from that, you're supposed to figure it all out. Um, and so one of the things that I sat down to try and do was like, okay, well, if this is the education I'm supposed to have, now what? And
Mm,
so I couldn't get from where I was, which was like, I want to learn more, to how can I use this every day without essentially traipsing through the kind of overall library of Masonic literature. And there just frankly wasn't a whole lot there. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of, strictly speaking, like deep mysticism stuff. Um, but the behavioral, like, how do I use this to help me tie my shoes better?
mm,
None of that was here.
right.
So it wasn't until I saw that deck by, I guess, Tabitha Cicero did a presentation at the Academy of Masonic Knowledge, and there was a hand-drawn tarot deck, and I was like, it occurred to me all of a sudden, like, this guy wasn't using this to play a game or, as a parlor trick to help, get some money or whatever. He wasn't grifting out on the street with these things. He was using them to navigate his mind. And
Mm.
so there's a lot of psychological precedents for this actually even now. There are therapies that have been developed for, in a psychological therapeutic practice for a kind of mental role play where you can take the different essentially functions of your brain. Maybe you take the voice of the desire and you start talking as that voice in your head to try and figure out like what's driving the bus here. Like, how do we figure this stuff out?
Right.
And when I saw these cards, I was like, that's what these really let you do is you can take
Mm.
on the roles in the lodge, right? We're formed, modeled after a working lodge, take on a role and then use the tools.
So I've heard guys say, "Hey, the reason I wear my Masonic ring is I put it on every morning, so it reminds me that I'm a Mason when I'm out in everyday life." Some guys will say, "Oh, I got this really cool, Masonic tattoo because the symbolism in this it just really speaks to me, and I wanted to
Mhm.
carry it on my skin for the rest of time." I'm like, "That's awesome too." Something like this, and that's what I liked about. I don't want to compare it to a toy, but to be able to pick it up and kind of play with it. I'm one of those people that has a number of like little fidget spinner things here in my office at home. I get the little hand squeezer things, and to have something like this coin around that I can keep in my pocket and pull out and flip around and then look at it, think about something that this would apply to, stick it back in my pocket, and then move forward. Yeah, this is a token. This is almost a totem for me.
Yeah. There's there is tons of precedent for this, right? So these instruments or artifacts or whatever you want to call them are a way to extrovert some of that thinking, right?
Mm,
Um, as people, men in particular, right? We have a lot of adrenaline going through our body at any given time. We have a lot of these processes that really are physical in nature, testosterone, et cetera, et cetera. So when you have objects in your hands, it creates a much, much stronger, more meaningful response between your mind and your body. The further you can strengthen that, the more you strengthen that, the more you understand what it is without suppressing the sensations you're getting, the more effective you get at having this sort of integrity throughout the entire sort of cognitive physiological process, right? So when you take these objects and put them in your hands, you can put your mind on the objects and the objects kind of in your mind, and it creates this synergy that's really, really productive.
love it, love it. So, with the aid of a 3D printer
Yes.
and your own engineering and design skills, the byproduct is this beautiful little black box that has these symbols and tokens on top of it. If we did the unboxing at home, mine came in this very nice blue velvet little bag as it was delivered to me. As I mentioned, it's got a cool lid, which all of this is all part of the same component. There's a little book inside, which we're going to go through here shortly. I don't know if Brian puts a nice, wonderful note in every single one of them to people that he makes and ships them
Uh,
for, but that would
I
be
do.
thoughtful and sweet. That's
I
not
do. That's kind
surprise.
of how it works.
But the cool thing is like, what's in the box? So like, what do we have here, and how are you using this?
Okay, cool. So, there's a couple things that are in the box and a couple things that aren't in the box. So if you're going to see some things when I go heads down here, that are maybe not yet available for consumption, but
Gotcha.
again, with all of these things,
And
um,
just to note to our podcast listener, you're like, oh my gosh, cameras. Don't worry, we'll describe everything to you. We're old radio guys. But to our YouTube live streamers and to those of us on YouTube, you're going to be able to see this video as he talks about heads over display. So enjoy.
right. So let me click the button and see if the magic happens. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So Uh, this is a smaller scale set than the one you have because I needed something smaller to fit on camera.
Mm,
But the idea here is you have in any given set Masonic symbols that you probably are familiar with. You don't need to go and learn something that you haven't already learned. Like that was a
mm,
big part of the conversation for me is I wanted this stuff to be accessible. If you have to go read 8 novels to figure out how to best apply it, that's probably not going to encourage you to act, right? And so, and I want to act. Um, so the idea here is you have these cards, and they each have a different symbolic sort of meaning and function, stuff that you're probably familiar with, and they are transparent for lots of reasons that we can get into in a second. But one of the cool things about them being transparent is you can actually use them as a photo frame. So if you're out taking pictures and you want to start to make some sort of reflective statements for later consumption, right? So I'll go and I'll take the compasses, for example, and the compasses makes a great photo frame because if I can get out of the deck here, uh, 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 because the compasses, right, teach us to circumscribe our desires within due bounds. So when you take a photograph of something that maybe where people aren't doing that, you now have a visual reminder and a good contrast and juxtaposition. You can take some of the pictures, some of the ideas here, and just start to use them to frame your everyday life. Um, in situations like say the craft, right? Which, if you're a Pennsylvania Mason, that visual makes a little more sense probably. But every one of these should again all call to mind a a different sort of Masonic symbol. Now, you may not remember the symbolism from each of these. You may not remember the in-depth understanding. That's what the book's for. The book's helps as a prompt.
Mm.
Um, so you get little prompts inside, like, so what does the Master Mason kind of apron mean again? How do I use that? When should I put that on? Do I ever stop being an entered apprentice? Right. So a lot of guys haven't done maybe the reflective, contemplative sort of process here. And what I wanted to do when I saw all this stuff was I wanted to develop a Masonic contemplative practice that did not require anybody to have deep repositories of background knowledge. The Masonic language is perfect in a lot of ways, more perfect than most of the other contemplative languages out there because it's craftsman language. It's language that's accessible by its very nature. The
Mm.
tools, you can pick them up and without a ton of background, think about them for just a couple of minutes and get to this is how I need to use this to solve the problem I'm struggling with internally. Right. So the book is there as a prompt. It's not obviously, like all disclaimers, it's not endorsed by any Grand Lodge. So it is not the definition for what any of these things are, but it's a reasonable interpretation, I think, that you could get
Hmm.
to in reflection. Uh, so then how do you use it is probably a logical next question. Yes.
How do you
So
use it, Brian?
look at
Tell
that.
us.
See what a setup. Um, so I don't know if have you ever, engaged in contemplative practice? Has somebody told you like go journal and you'll just figure your stuff out? Like journaling is the way.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, you had me on board when you said you're not supposed to go read 9 books to understand something or find something or learn something, that you should be able to pick up something. And again, the skill level for all of this is whether you're an entered apprentice, you're going to just look at these a little bit differently, but you're talking to yourself through a lot of this. You're working through things. So there are, yes, wrong answers, but there's not a definitive the answer. There's several answer could be, or it could be this, it could be that. I look at this as like a discussion tool. So when you say, contemplatory or contemplative, I would look at it as something I would be asking myself and probing myself,
Yep.
like always kind of knowing deep down inside, I think I know what the answer is, but just hearing what other things are going to be coming from that little conversation with the guy inside.
Yeah. So this is a way to facilitate the conversation between the voices in your head. And for anyone at home thinking like, what kind of voices does Brian have going on in his head? I assure you, it's just the running narrative that most people have. What's really great is if you give that narrative a job, just like a prompt in AI or a role playing session with friends, you can give those voices responsibilities and say, hey, pretend you're this, and this is the entirety of the conversation. And
Mm.
so So that's where you start with this stuff. The way I start is I pick a role in the lodge. So the lodge is modeled after a working environment. So let's take the role that's kind of easiest and most obvious. That's the role of a worshipful master, and that visual there should call to mind the collar with the worshipful master's square and compasses, or the square on it. So what is the role of the worshipful master? See, what is the role of a worshipful master?
Well, there's what the ritual says, which
Well,
is to
that's sufficient.
right, yeah. So I'm not going to say that. Um, really,
Okay,
the
so it's public in my jurisdiction, and it is to open the lodge just like the sun opens the
right,
day.
right.
All right, and it is to create a space for good work to get done.
Right. And so I always like to say the ritual says this, but if someone was to say, "Hey, what do you think the role of the worshipful master is?" I'm like, he's like the president of the club. He's like the dad of the club too. He's responsible for everything that happens in and outside of the lodge during that time that he is master of the lodge.
Right. So when we talk about taking on that role, that is largely the executive function. So what is it that I
Mhm.
want to do, and what it's important to understand that the worshipful master doesn't do all the work. Right, the
Right.
worshipful master creates a space for the work to happen. Otherwise, he wouldn't need additional support. He wouldn't need a junior warden. He wouldn't need, a senior warden. He wouldn't need any of that stuff. So you take on the role of the worshipful master and you say, okay, what's the objective I'm trying to accomplish here? What is the work that I'm trying to do?
Right.
And maybe you don't know what that is. Maybe you're like a lot of people, like me, or like I used to be anyway, until I discovered all this stuff. Um, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life.
Mm.
None. So a lot of the time I spent sitting as worshipful master as a concept, I had no idea. So then I broke out the tools.
Gotcha. So the other
Okay.
thing that I always like to talk to people about too about the worshipful master is there's the symbolic, the part of that is that when you get to the master mason level, and I could see easily how this deck could be, I don't want to say a game to play in lodge, but probably one of the best lodge discussion nights you'll ever have, because someone's going to chime up and say, "Oh, well, there's also during that Heramic legend who sits in the master's chair," and we should always be trying to exemplify the wisdom that comes from most excellent King Solomon, and blah 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 blah, and you get into all of these discussions, and how would somebody who is wise and is a king, how would they handle these situations? How can I tap into the wisdom or the knowledge of these different individuals? You could also sit there as you think about worshipful masters. It's just the men who have sat in that chair and maybe have
Yeah.
had to make tough decisions, whether it was in lodge or out of lodge for the year that year. And how what leadership can you embody of the decisions that they made? What traits? So yeah, I love all of this.
Awesome. Thank you. Um,
You're welcome. Order
so,
now.
so the idea is, you sit down and maybe you're struggling to figure out what your purpose in life is. And that's like a regular occurrence for a lot of folks, particularly the younger men who haven't kind of come to that level of self-awareness yet, where they're like, this is really my jam. So sit as worshipful master and say, okay, what's my situation? What am I trying to do with myself? I know, for example, maybe I break out my trowel as the worshipful master and say, okay, listen, the one thing I definitely know is that whatever I choose to do from a vocational perspective, it has to be filled with care.
Mm,
Right? Some guys, I'm going to pick a profession that is, traditionally, and sarcastically soulless, right? Some guys grow up and go, I want to be an accountant. So
mm,
maybe the trowel isn't their jam, right? Maybe they
mhm.
move to a different tool. For all the accountants out there, I apologize. I'm just having a little fun. But you get the idea that uh, as worshipful master, as a role play, some of these tools are going to resonate with you more than others. Which ones are you rejecting? Which ones are you keeping? Which ones are you working with? Which ones are you avoiding? That conversation alone is the journey of a lifetime if you spend time thinking about it. But let's say, rather than trying to plot the course of your life as worshipful master, maybe you're confronting a situation in your life. Maybe you're looking to earn a little more revenue. right? Who
Mm.
isn't these days? So that's a different job altogether, right? That's the treasurer's job. So the treasurer's job is going to manage resource and help figure out, how all the resources and whether or not you're getting your ROI and all that kind of stuff. The treasurer can use the entire suite of tools as well. So you can sit as a treasurer as a mindset and go, hey, if I'm looking for more revenue, what have I done? The three knocks are a great example for that. What have I
Mm.
done to seek more revenue? Who have I asked for help? And what actions did I take to get there? Right. And I'd love to tell you like this was something I sat down and like, this is all in the ritual. It's about 5 minutes deep in some reflection, and you go, I can get there from here.
Hmm.
Right? I didn't invent anything. This is all in there, baby. It's like Prego. So, for the for the younger guys, that was based on an old tomato sauce commercial. Um, but it's all in there. What it's not, or what it wasn't for me, was actionable. And this
Right.
is the beginning of the process of taking all of this apparatus, the lodge as concept, the symbols as tools, and breaking them down in a way that lets me put all of my thinking out in front of me and move those thoughts around without all of the discomfort of trying to figure out what I'm thinking or feeling. I'll get to that too at some point. Like that's an important part of the discovery process. But if I have it in front of me, I can do the work first. Everything I make at a Mason's Work is designed around Masonic symbols that can be used to help you become a better person. That
Mm.
is everything. These little chips here, this little let's talk later chip. This is a chip that I give to somebody when we're in the middle of, that open meeting stuff before dinner or after dinner or whatever. When somebody does something and I'm like, hey, maybe I need to give him a little bit of counsel. I
Mm.
just put this chip in his hand so I don't have to try and correct his behavior right away. Or if I have a business thing, right, where I want to talk to him later about lodge business because he brought something up in conversation, but now's not the time. This is going to help me have those conversations so I can get better at correcting it in private and celebrating in public. Everything here, all of these tools are all designed to help you become a better Mason, become a better man.
Mm. One thing I can't wait for is now that I have this deck is to jump into Masonic education. I can't wait until we obligate a new man, a new brother, or we're getting ready to pass an EA to Fellowcraft, or even get ready to raise a Sublime Master Mason, because this is going to be the highlight of the end of our okay, you've displayed proficiency, now let's have some fun, let's actually have a snowball fight here, let's toss this back like you would with dad with the ball in the backyard, like let's do this, let me give you this, I'll take this, let's build this conversation, because it is tough sometimes to get into esoteric or philosophical or higher level conversations with guys just by saying, okay, so the 24-inch gauge, how would you practically use that in your life? Like we've already got the pre-programmed answer of what I started with was, well, the ritual says this, but if you really tried to do that, it would pretty much be impossible. But here's how you could make it work if you think about it this way or that way. With a tool like this, you have it in your hand. You're examining it. You're really reinforcing that of which you already know.
Yeah, and it makes it actionable, right? So
Mm.
the 24-inch gauge is a perfect example, right? So if you take the 24-inch gauge at face value, what it really is like, okay, go get your Franklin Covey planner or whatever your favorite day planner is and get to it. Start counting time. But that's like the low ball interpretation of this. That's the easiest possible place to kind of think about it.
Mm.
Why don't you sit for a minute as junior warden and talk about the 24-inch gauge, the senior warden or the junior warden whose responsibility is rest and refreshment and
Hmm.
genuine rest and refreshment, right? The idea of nourishing self-care and taking, making sure that we have enough so that we can bring our best self to the table as workmen. Now let's break out the 24-inch gauge and approach it from that lens, that perspective, and the job changes completely. The tool
Yep.
changes completely, right? As cognitive lenses, these tools can give you so much more than even the surface level interpretation. And I'll tell you now, when I was raised, there was no like, oh, here's your 24-inch gauge, here's the recommended reading list, go.
Mm.
Now I wouldn't want it, because without the context of the role I'm trying to use that gauge in, it doesn't make any sense anyway.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And tools like this make Freemasonry fun. Because I always say, hey, look, dude, if you can't do the basic proficiency of whatever the catechism is or whatever the learning is that you have to do to display that you're an entered apprentice before you can move on, man, you are not going to have fun in this, because we're going to have conversations around you and it's all going to go completely over your head. And it's okay if at first, like, you're struggling. We all did, but eventually it gets in there and then it becomes ingrained, and then you can actually put some of this to action. So, like, for example, one of the things I noticed with your deck, and I'm just going to hold up some of the ones that you made for me, is they come apart. It's like a 4D, and you can lay and unlike playing cards, I can lay this and kind of make my own Masonic hand. And it
Yeah.
was so fascinating because, for example, this, the letter G. I think in every jurisdiction, we all have that very famous uh, lecture about the letter G that comes at a certain part in the degree, which then you could lay the compasses on top of it. And you could then put the square on top of the compasses. And then this empty frame here, which was my favorite, like this is the Freemason frame, which, hi. And then you put all of this together and you're like, okay, take these four things. And what does this, break them apart, put them all back together? What does this represent to you? Like, this is going to be such a fun conversation tool to have with brothers in lodge. I can't wait.
Yeah. I am excited for your application, and I want to hear all of the sort of war stories and um, what I think more than anything, and just by virtue of that kind of sentiment alone, I want to hear about it now. And because we have the deck, we have a language to talk about it. This
Yes.
is not merely the contemplative practice, which in and of itself, as a secular contemplative practice, is just richer than anything I have found. And I'm tooting my own horn here, but
Mm-hmm.
as a secular contemplative practice, it's amazing. As a shared vocabulary, it now has the ability to potentially to compound efforts in a way that we really don't take advantage of as Masons, I don't think.
Oh, yeah.
This lexicon is so capable and so valuable.
You give a couple explanations in the some ways to use this deck instructions in the little handy dandy booklet that will come with your deck. There's the photo frame game, which looks totally fun. Use it as a frame and take a picture of something in your environment, and then again having that conversation of how it relates to. And it's just a random draw, which makes it even more fun. A random picture and a random symbol. Daily meditation, you touched on that. Reconnecting with your Masonic journey, arranging the cards or assembling them in the order of your Masonic journey. That would be a fun thing to do. Strategy generation or problem analysis. Look at things that are going on and figure and take a random card, reflect on the concepts on how it could help you get to a solution. Empathy, you talk about that in here. Gaining new perspectives, project planning. The other thing is that I knew a master that wanted to do the old not Tyler's lecture, but similar of like, hey, I'm going to assign a working tool from this degree to these brothers, and I'm going to let you, break away for like 10 minutes and then come back in the lodge and tell us what your group thinks about it. How much more cooler, man, would it be as if you actually had the 4D things to go into that other room? Your discussion is you're never going to want to come back into the lodge because you're going to have so much fun in that breakout. But then when you do come back into the lodge, that's going to be pretty amazing too, because literally only one person can talk about the compasses because there's only one set of the compasses in this game.
Yeah. So you get all of that back.
Mm,
And maybe it's been there in your lodge, maybe it wasn't. Now it can be, right? You get all of that. And when you start doing like diagnostic, let's say a buddy comes to you and they're really struggling, because we're supposed to be here to help each other out. Help them find the role that they're struggling with. Help them
mm.
find the place that they're struggling from. And then when you see them next, you don't have to go through the whole context and say, hey, last time we talked, you were having a hard time with your chaplain, your inner chaplain.
Yep.
Let's talk about that. Right. It's so much better and so much stronger as a toolkit to be able to facilitate that mutual aid that we talk about as core to the craft.
Mm. So he's a fellow podcaster. He's a wonderful Pennsylvania Freemason. He's brother Brian Mattocks from A Mason's Work. That is the podcast. The website is amasonswork.com. He's been showing a little show and tell tonight. He's busted out his Masonic Reflection Deck. It wouldn't be fair because I'm sure there's a listener or two that's going, okay, so how did he do this? What we kind of teased a little bit about this. It was a 4D printer and some ideas. But beyond that, what's the craftsmanship? Because that's what baffled me is that some of the symbols that you have pulled into this, like the three knocks that you showed on the overhead
Uh-huh.
shot, I would have never thought how to put all that together. But that is such an important part of our ritual and a part of our story.
Uh-huh.
Give us some of the craftsmanship and some of the thought that went into making these decks.
So I sat down and said, "How can I represent this well?" I guess.
Mm.
So my journey with 3D printing started about halfway through, I guess, what is my Masonic career at this point currently. Um, and when I say halfway through, so it started in 2020, maybe 2021. And I bought it because I did not have any real sense of how I was going to go learn math. Like, what? So, uh, I'm a computer guy. I'm a kind of a tech nerd. I like this kind of stuff for fun. I got a 3D printer and sat on it for a while. Like it
Mm.
just wasn't there. And then I saw that Academy of Masonic Knowledge presentation and went, oh, maybe I can actually use this to do some inner work as opposed to just acquire one of the seven liberal arts and be done with it. Right. Um, and I'm like, well, how would I use this to navigate my stuff? So what things would I want to think about?
Mm.
Right. So the three knocks, for example, it's not called out in the ritual for other than a sentence in most jurisdictions, like I said. But I went, that was a really important part of the conversation. It was important enough that it made it into the ritual that 15 guys have to get together and practice.
Hmm.
So let me think about this for a minute. Maybe there's something to it. And so for all of the symbols in here, they all represent a function or a perspective or a concept. And so when I understood what the three knocks were all about, I went, okay, cool. I now want to add that to the sort of list of perspectives I want to include that I can extrovert and work with out in front of me. And so for each of them, I drew the symbol. My idea again was to make them super accessible. So this is not, to be quite clear, it's not high art. There is artisanship, but somebody who's been practicing drawing for a lifetime is going to look at this and go, this is very, very chunky stuff.
It's simple, but simple works here.
That was
Like
that's my jam. I
yeah. The fact that things overlay in what is it, 3D? I don't know if I'm saying this right. Is it a 3D printer or a 4D printer? I don't have one,
3D
obviously.
printer. Yep.
Yeah. So a 3D printer becomes a 4D symbolic portal that you can go into and like look into these cards and use your mind to move things around. Like, yeah, I thought this this is awesome. When I first saw this, I was like, I got to talk to Brian about this. I did not expect to have my own set. And again, I really appreciate it. I know I'm not the first brother that you've shared this with. I'm wondering who the first person was and how you said, hey, I had this crazy idea. Just walk with me here. What do you
I
think of these?
I made it for my lodge. So I actually, it's custom in my district or my jurisdiction to give the worshipful master to give a gift to the brethren on their birthday.
Hmm.
And so I heard that. I thought, wow, this is cool. I went into the East and I made one for every one of the brothers in my lodge.
That's
So
awesome.
I brought about 50 to 100 of these to the table, and knowing that most of the guys, some percentage of the guys weren't going to show up. Then I started giving them out and to people that seemed like esoteric or introspective thinkers in my jurisdiction. And
Mm.
I got it in the hands of, or at least conceptually in the hands of a couple of fellows from the Sonic Light podcast. And they said, well, just be prepared to make a ton of these things. And I was like, I wasn't happy with them. They were good, but not like amazing. So um, let's, work on it. And so then I spent the next kind of 8 months after that being on that show honing what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it with these things. And the deeper I went into it, the more I explored. Just like everything, the further you trace it, the easier it will become. Right.
Yep.
The further I went, the more parallels I found in modern psychology, in the wisdom traditions, in all of these, places where we store wisdom and knowledge as a people. And I said the only thing that was missing for me for any of this was just the accessibility component. So
Mm.
by drawing these out and making them accessible, I get past some of the difficult spots. The cards are one thing. These coins are new. These are all roll-based coins because in writing the book, I'm now working on the full-blown book, not the little guy here. This is more like a prompt, setup.
Mhm.
The full-blown book, which has the scientific underpinnings of what I'm doing and has all of the call outs to the various therapeutic, practices that inform all of this work. uh, I said, I need to better develop the protocol. We need the roles, right? So your jurisdiction will vary. My jurisdiction has some very interesting sort of roles and titles that you don't find in a lot of lodges, like a pursuit. No one really knows what that is.
I was gonna say
Um,
that's the first one that comes to mind. I don't even know how to say it correctly.
Try and spell it. Google
Oh, I know it's
Google gives you
PUR
fifty
something.
fifty.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Google gives you 50-50 on whether or not you can actually spell that. Um, but when I was at Masonic Week last year, some guys were like, "Hey, listen, if you could come up with something to help me do floor work, I'd like to buy
Mm.
like little tokens just for that." So I said, "Okay, well, here's where this goes anyway. So let me cook these up." Again, the idea is you take on these roles, and every one of the roles in a working lodge is a different perspective. That's the one thing that a lot of guys don't get. This is
Yeah.
not ceremonial only, right? The deacons have, a job translating the will of the worshipful master from one role to the other. That's something that we kind of completely ignore when we say carry messages. It's not carry messages. There's an interpretive act there. The secretary has a meaningful cognitive job,
Mm.
right? That's the memory keeper for the lodge. It's not just admin and making sure you fill out your dues cards
Mm.
correctly. It is what's worth recording, and are you recording it honestly? The work that's in Freemasonry that's available to you, again, disregard any of these things. Go draw them out on cards on your own. You'll get to some crazy great places.
Mm.
If you want a head start, the tools are already made. I've already made a set of tools that you can use, but this isn't denied no one. This knowledge is in the craft for anyone willing to look. And I'm even willing to venture that you don't have to be a Mason to know this either. The
Mm.
tools, because they're working man's tools, are designed to be used by anyone that's capable of work.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say, for those that are familiar with the term lodge of instruction, it's like having a lodge of instruction in your pocket.
Yep.
And that's what I was just blown away with this, because having these deeper discussions, and you hit it like right on the head, man, like having a discussion about um roles, the actual physical roles during a degree, where you're supposed to be. No, 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 you need to walk with this person. No, your shoulders need to touch at this point. You need to be here by the time this person finishes saying that, or otherwise we look. But then we get into the deeper part of like, why are you doing this, and what is the meaning for this? And yes, of course, it's for the brother that's going through this, or the candidate that's going through this, or the brothers that are watching, or just for yourself. But also there's this other deeper and you can start going into the layers of all of this, and tools like this take those very difficult and sometimes complex conversations to have, and make it so easy that anybody can get it. And then you can start having the real exchange of like, okay, well, hey, thanks for sharing this with me, because now when I think about this, I think about this or that. And you're like, awesome, whatever it takes, you've got it, and we're making a connection, and it's happening.
And that connection, that deeper connection, empowers the ritual. So we do a lot of things backwards in the craft writ large, and I don't want to get into a deep meta conversation about it. But one of the things we do is we correct the ritual side of the conversation, not the understanding and sentiment kind of the side of the conversation. If a guy knows why he's saying what he's saying, he'll care a lot more about getting it right.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Meaning.
so this
Yeah.
helps you get to that meaningful understanding. You hit the nail on the head there. That meaningful understanding. And it elevates the experience, not just for you as an individual, but for everyone around you. The more you understand, the more you can deepen your own experience of the craft. And again, I'm not looking for, the interpretation of somebody, 100 years dead. I'm interested in what it means to you, Brother Arce. Like, what does this mean to you? Because
Mm,
you're in my lodge. George Washington, regrettably, is not in my lodge. He's never going to be in my lodge, and he has performed all of the masonry he's ever going to perform. The guy in my lodge, I want to know his vocation. I want to know what tools he's working with. I want to know what he's working on. Because if I can make the investment in the guy in the room, rather than perhaps the deep investments in the historical context, there's guys that love that, and I'm not trying to say it's not valuable, but I'd much rather work with the guy in the room because he's the guy that I'm going to need help from.
mm.
George Washington, when I'm struggling with, something in my career or my work, he can't show up and be like, Brian, you should have
Right.
zigged instead of zagged.
Let me help you with that flat tire, Brian. I got you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is a craft for living men
Mm.
that want to embrace that and do the work with other men.
Love it. All right, let's talk about a Mason's work. We introduced you as a new part of our Craftsmen Online podcast team in December, which seems so far away. We got through the holidays, we're into the new year, and I've been digging this, listening to your episodes. And when I received this deck and was, I looked at the very kind letter that I mentioned that you wrote for me and the inscription on the inside, and kind of cheated and started looking into the little book and seeing what some of this stuff was about. It really gave me more context about the episodes that you're sharing. And when I talk to people about what a Mason's work is, I tell them, okay, so it's Brother Brian. He was kind of this frustrated Mason that, he wanted to talk about these things and he just couldn't find the people to talk to. So he just turned it into a podcast. And his whole mission is he wants to take all of those things that we talk about in our ritual and it really not just bring them into everyday life, but drag it you kicking and screaming into realizing that you can do this in everyday life. And it doesn't have to be this torturous thing to be like, oh, I must walk uprightly and be a Mason because I am a Mason.
Yeah. The We have a lot of knowledge and depth of wisdom in the craft if you look for it.
Mm,
What and a lot of folks are practicing it on a daily basis, but they haven't reconciled that practice back to the tools they use. And because they've not taken that connection backwards, they can't teach it to somebody else. So why would you form a community of practice where you can't meaningfully talk to each other about the practice itself?
right.
The podcast is designed to help folks contextualize some of the knowledge and hear about what happens when you use it. Hear about what happens when you use it wrong. Because I have, for as much as I've done a lot of work on this, I am regularly screwing this up, and I have no problem telling folk like I missed it this week, or I use this tool. I learned the lesson of this tool because I did it wrong for a long time.
Mm,
And here's what this tool is capable of teaching you if you only look. And
mm,
that's really the design. A lot of the podcast is kind of an overview of the tool, an overview of the roles, perhaps in the lodge, an overview of some of the fundamental underpinnings that the Masonic education provides. There's a ton of not just the role based or the tool based application, but there's a lot of pretty explicit rules about the way the world works embedded in the craft that we don't really hear a lot about. You may remember some of it maybe from the Middle Chamber lecture if you're in the Preston Webb jurisdiction. If you're in the Pennsylvania jurisdiction, you'll hear about it alluded to more than anything else. But there's a ton of bedrock sort of reality shaping truth that is embedded in every one of these symbols and across the craft writ large. And so the Mason's Work podcast is designed to surface that.
Yeah, if you're listening and you're like, man, I wish I had somebody in lodge, or I wish I could have gone back and had this explained to me. Well, you can start that today. As easy it is for you to listen to the Craftsman Online podcast, Mason's Work podcast is all in the same places, and we're going to make it super easy for you. Just show notes for this episode. You'll find the link to get a Mason's Work on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else that Brian and his team are on. Again, dude, thank you so much again for this gift. Thank you so much again for coming and being a part of our family. I'm super excited about what's ahead. And thanks for being on this episode of the Craftsman Online podcast.
I am just delighted to have been here. Thank you so much, brother.